At Staples Business Advantage, nothing can top the smarts and instincts of the thousands of experts on our team. While AI excels at
processing data, automating tasks, and providing insights for better decision-making.
And when they're used together, they're far more powerful than either is alone.
Whoa. I've never felt more alive.
Let Staples Business Advantage use today's latest innovations, plus our team's experience, to make business easier for you.
Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.
At Mayo Clinic in Florida, we're conquering the unconquerable. Using artificial intelligence and data, our experts can create a personalized gene roadmap just for you, customizing your cancer treatment, giving your body exactly what it needs to fight the disease. We're making more possible at Mayo Clinic, because every day we're doing what's never been done. Learn more at mayoclinic.org/possible. Mayo Clinic. You know where to go.
To get the Crime Writers on After Show right now, go to patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, he was the self-proclaimed king of pop, the superstar laid low by allegations of molesting children. Years after his death, how do we process the legacy of Michael Jackson? We'll review the podcast Think Twice, featuring Leon Neyfakh and Jay Smooth. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of the Piper Green series of cozy mysteries, Laura Bricker. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Rebecca. Today I met a dog called Hyper Piper when I was out on my walk.
Wow.
Incredible.
Hyper Piper was a King Charles Spaniel. It's very cute.
Incredible.
Is Hyper a nickname or the actual legal name of the dog?
No, that was actually a nickname because it was like a 12-week-old puppy and it was like running around like, bleep.
Oh.
And finally, our resident Doubting Thomas, the author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of the Strange Arrivals podcast, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast, Toby Smooth. No, I'm just kidding. Toby Ball. Hello, Toby.
Hello, Rebecca.
All right. So, Kevin, this is obviously Thursday's podcast.
Obviously.
What is happening on Monday's show?
On Monday, we're going to be talking about the podcast Brokers, Bagmen, and Moles.
Ooh, what's that about, Kevin?
Oh, it's about an FBI investigation into exchanges fraud on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. But it doesn't really go well.
Oh, like orange juice concentrates, like orange juice futures?
There's a little bit of Trading Places clips that come up. So, yeah, you're on the right track.
All right. I'm looking forward to that one. Okay. Well, this is a big topic we've got to talk about. So should we just get right into it?
Jump into it.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and drop that first clip right now. Leading off.
Members of the NAACP have been jailed and even killed in the noble pursuit of those ideals upon which our country was founded. None of these goals is more meaningful for me at this time in my life than the notion that everyone is presumed to be innocent.
Just as his commercial success began to wane, Michael Jackson faced career-ending criminal charges he molested a child. Not the first time such allegations surfaced. It was the most serious item on the list of problematic conduct and idiosyncratic behavior which defined his public persona.
Suddenly, it seemed like Michael's camp could no longer get the press to focus solely on his weird but ultimately kind of amusing behavior. Instead, journalists were interested in things Michael did not want to talk about.
But his journey from fame to infamy was not simple, nor is there consensus on its effects on his legacy. Even a decade after his death, there remains one camp of fans dedicated to his influence and innocence, and another that's come to terms with the veracity of his deplorable actions.
We're not here to try to prove that Michael Jackson was guilty or that he was innocent. Instead, we'll be using his story as a window onto the world around him. The world that shaped him even as he was shaping it.
From Audible Originals, Wondery, and Prologue Productions comes Think Twice, Michael Jackson. Hosts Leon Neyfakh and Jay Smooth present original interviews seeking new ways to examine Jackson's staying power in pop culture despite years of disturbing allegations. Think Twice, Michael Jackson is currently available exclusively on Audible and scheduled for wide release in the near future. Spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about plot points from Think Twice. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. Now, Laura, we have looked at other media, looking at Michael Jackson's sex abuse allegations. What do you think this podcast does beside that it does well?
Well, it's interesting because we really don't hear that much in detail about the sexual abuse allegations until the end of this podcast. So I think really well, it really takes this sort of step back, this zoom out, reminds me of talking about Serial again, to not just look at the sexual abuse side of Michael Jackson, which we've talked about extensively in recent years. We watched that documentary, but really to do an in-depth dive into his career, how it unfolded, his legacy in pop culture, and talking to other people that were involved at his life or, during his career that offered observations about what he was like. I mean, I think it just gave a really deep picture, and it was done in a very thoughtful way. So to me, that thoughtful way of telling it really gave to me, I mean, I always have felt like he's just a tragedy. I just feel like Michael Jackson is just a freaking tragedy. But I think, it looks at how our culture, I wouldn't say allowed this to happen, but how our culture sort of created him in a way, from being a child star to what he became when he wanted to have a statue like the Queen.
Yeah. That was really something. So, Toby, you have a really interesting take, because we hear at the beginning of the podcast, there was this widespread thing on news bites we kept hearing over and over and over again. When the sex abuse allegations first came out, a lot of people said and believed, he's messed up because he, quote, didn't have a childhood, right? And that was the big narrative. And it was very much seen as the reason why, even before the allegations, that he was, quote, weird, the reason why he sort of inhabited this world where he had a house with a roller coaster and a petting zoo, or a real zoo, actually, not a petting zoo, and, played with toys and hung out with kids. But, you wrote something about that I'd love you to be able to talk about a little bit.
I guess the thing that this show does really well, I think, is I feel as though the easy kind of fallbacks are, he was a pedophile, but sort of looking at that without any context, or kind of putting it mostly on his dad, I guess, and his dad's abuse and all this stuff, or being a star from an early age and not having a childhood. What this thing, I think, shows is a more complex story that involves, early stardom, and then going from being in the biggest group in the world, or one of the biggest pop groups in the world, to being the biggest single person in the world, the whole thing with being a Jehovah's Witness and then having to leave, and the sort of contradictory elements there. I just kind of wonder if all this stuff is Neverland Ranch and his weird behaviors, it seems like more of a mental illness thing than a sort of lost childhood thing. And I don't think I think they are definitely connected, but I don't I don't follow Michael Jackson that much, but you don't hear it come up in quite that way, I think, a lot of times. I think, again, it's looking at it without context, or trying to draw this straight line between some people's behaviors and his later behavior, and not really looking at what was his mental health in general, and what kind of pressures were exacerbating it, and what in his past was exacerbating it, but that being sort of the central fact of sort of his existence, especially towards the end.
It's really interesting. You just brought up something that I had not heard a lot about before. I mean, I knew that Michael Jackson was a Jehovah's Witness, and, that was part of, some of the coverage about him. The episode about his being a Jehovah's Witness was so fascinating in this podcast. I did not realize, to the extent around, the release of Thriller, that he was still very much immersed in the door knocking, the going to meetings, being in disguise and being on the street as a Jehovah's Witness. And they have the guy in the podcast who was his friend in the church, who had this very close-up view of him. and these two lives that he was leading, and how sort of under the thrall of this like Jehovah's Witness mentor he was, and how he was forced to sort of say like, I don't believe in the art that I'm doing. At the same time, he very clearly did believe in the art he was doing.
Volk still remembers knocking on people's doors with Michael at his side and seeing their reactions.
People would stare, like, that guy really looks like Michael Jackson. You could tell. They would never say it, but you could see in their eyes they were thinking, this guy looks like Michael Jackson.
And there was this whole thing, and Kevin, I don't know if the podcast does take a side on this about these conflicting forces in his life, the not having a childhood, the sort of being pulled in one direction or the other.
Well, I think Leon does a good job of setting this up at the beginning of that episode, that either people acknowledge that, when they're talking about his sexual allegations, it's either there's an excuse that he had no childhood, or it's an explanation, or, posing the way people use that. I don't think in a lot of ways they come down on a side, and this is probably my only criticism of the podcast, if it's called Think Twice. I don't know if this really feels like a re-examination, that people ought to reconsider their perceptions of Michael Jackson based on the information we're going to get. It doesn't really go there, but it does what a great Leon Neyfakh podcast does, which is tell a story, a larger story colored by, these peripheral perspectives. Getting Michael Jackson's manager would be a great coup, but they don't. But there is value in getting the secretary who had a crush on him. I don't think when you're putting together a Michael Jackson documentary, you say the first person we need to get is Doug E. Doug, because he's going to have, the most important perspective.
I don't think you honor people by putting them on a pedestal. I think you honor them by examining them truthfully and holistically. I think that's the way you honor people. And I think the proper way to honor people. Otherwise, you're not honoring them. You're deifying them. You're lionizing them.
But we also saw Dougie Doug in the We Need to Talk About Cosby documentary. So, but they find the value in that.
Which, by the way, just won a Peabody Award.
Oh yeah, Peabody's all around. Congratulations, Connie Walker. Not to go off on a tangent,
yes.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's what it does, and I think it's added. And I'd love to talk about Jay Smooth's contributions to this too. But I mean, I think hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, we'll get back to that in a second. But just to talk about the Jehovah's Witness episode for a second, Laura, I know that you had feelings about that too, and how just like stunning that was to hear that at this. I mean, Thriller was the biggest album in the world, like ever. I mean, I know that Toby's going to say he never bought it or heard it because that's how Toby is. But it was like undeniably a pop culture force. I mean, I was taking ice skating lessons and we had to do like our stupid routine to Billie Jean and Thriller montage situation. Like you could not escape it no matter where you were, where you lived. And, the fact that he was still doing door knocking for Jehovah's Witnesses at the time and being told by the church that he had to renounce his own work when, by the way, his work was his renouncing his own identity with his father, who had been his abuser. I mean, that was really interesting. I mean, this is, by the way, not me in any way excusing Michael Jackson and, his crimes, but like it was an interesting moment after, of course, then we heard that period of his life in The Wiz in New York where he had this moment of like potential freedom. But the Jehovah's Witness episode I thought was a very strong episode.
Yeah. What I thought was so interesting about that is like I knew he was a Jehovah's Witness, but I guess I felt like once he got into his music career that I guess I just assumed that wasn't as big a part of his life. But then, what I also think was really interesting about that is when he goes from being Michael Jackson, the performer, to Michael Jackson, either at school or out as a Jehovah's Witness, he becomes like very shy and very like self-effacing. And like here he's like wearing this like disguise because he doesn't want anyone to recognize him. And it's like so interesting to think about that transformation from that somebody who's putting themselves forward like, oh, shucks, oh, no, oh, golly, gee willikers, like whatever it is he's saying. Are you doing an
impression?
Yeah, that was my impression. But to go from that to then like this larger than life performer was really interesting. And it was interesting how he remained dedicated to participating in things within his church that were required of him. And for as long as he did, I thought that was just fascinating.
But at the same time, this is what's weird to me. The same time he's that guy who can't look people in the eye, who's super shy, who can't take a compliment, he's planting stories about himself in the press. He's making people call him the king of pop. He later wants Toby to have someone make a 200-foot statue of him. Like, he is a legend builder who wants people to see him a certain way. Which is he two people, or is he one person who's code switching depending on who he's with?
I don't know how much that shyness stuff is just a cover just to give him some breathing room. He's just so big that to say he's a narcissist or has delusions of grandeur, if you've really got that grandeur, are they delusions? I don't know. I kind of felt like that kind of stuff was sort of a more accurate mirror into his personality and sort of the things that he actually ends up doing than the sort of shy, barely talks above a whisper, all this stuff. Because even when he's sort of later on, when he's talking, when people are asking him about, don't you think it's kind of weird that kids are sleeping in your bed?
Yep.
And he talks about it in his little kind of shy, quiet voice. But the shit that he's saying is actually kind of wild, right? I mean, he's saying, no, it's beautiful. It's awesome. And I don't know why people don't get that. So he's sort of out of touch. I think he must understand that society looks down upon it. Like, plenty of people are telling him about it, but he doesn't feel the need or can't sort of play under those strictures. So yeah, I kind of came away thinking that the sort of soft-spoken, humble Michael Jackson might not have been the most accurate sort of representation of his true kind of self based on what we heard in this.
So Kevin, what do you think of the formatics here? For the first time ever, we hear Leon Neyfakh with a co-host.
Yeah, I believe so. I do like Jay Smooth here. First of all, I'll just say that in the beginning, sort of the interaction, which not ever having a sidekick, we never really sort of get this from Leon, where he can kind of bring a little more of himself and his opinions and stuff. I think in the beginning, it sounded a little stilted, but by the end, the two really seemed to have a connection and a kind of chemistry and really talking about stuff that seemed extemporaneous. And I think, Jay Smooth, it's like, oh, Jay Smooth just slipped into the chat here in the podcast world. I think he's great. He brings a strong and logical partnership with Leon because they're different, right? One's a fan, one's not. One's black, one's white, one's a neo-historian, one's an entertainment commentator, one's in his 50s, one's in his 30s. And they also give each other sections to talk about. They're not trading lines back and forth like a tennis match. So I think that really adds something to not only the sound of the podcast, but the content.
I think I agree with you. At the beginning of it, it sounded like we have two hosts because we have two hosts because we had to have two hosts for this.
Yeah.
That's what it sounded like to me. It sounded like we have to have another perspective, so we're going to get another host to do this. That's how it sounded, and I was like, I totally get it. This is the right choice, and it's the right person, but it sounds like very deliberate.
Yeah. And by the time they get to the end and they're talking about
the second half of the podcast, it super fucking works.
Yeah. I was going to say, by the time they get to the end of the podcast and they're talking about their experience going to the Broadway show.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like they just said, bullet point, we're going to talk about that. Hit record.
My strong recommendation for an editing change I would have made is I would have opened the podcast with a scene of them flipping through the National Enquirer articles together. Because that was
a great scene.
That was a great scene. And then you hear them interacting with each other and you actually hear that their voices, because Leon Neyfakh is one of those people where his speaking voice sounds just like his hosting voice, but his hosting voice is so hosty sounding that when you hear him just talking, it sounds like he's also talking in his hosty voice. But when you hear him interacting with somebody and he sounds like Leon Neyfakh, you're like, oh, that's just how Leon Neyfakh talks. Mm-hmm. So I would have opened with that scene and then you would have heard their interactions. And just that scene was so bright. And it would have been just a really good opening to the podcast.
Sally Jesse and Rush Limbaugh out for each other's blood.
Oh, wow. Dynasty co-stars snubbed as Heather Locklear weds.
Outrageous rules allow anyone to drive a school bus.
Wokeness already out of control.
They could have saved the Wacko Jacko stuff for for later for that episode.
You didn't think Dougie Doug's recollections of the, what was it, the NAACP Image Awards?
No, I don't think that was a great opening. That was
okay.
not the strongest scene I think they should have opened. I think they should have opened it with the National Enquirer scene. Because, by the way, that was much more emblematic of like, they should have opened it with that scene, or they should have opened it with everybody watching the Video Music Awards, or the Motown Music Awards, where he did the moonwalk, which is the iconic moment that everybody remembers, right, Kevin?
Yeah, it's iconic, like getting your episodes of Crime Writers on early and ad free.
Just like that, Kevin. Nice transition into our business section, early and ad free.
Yeah, well, you see, we're like Leon and Jay Smooth.
We just trade off,
just sliding right into each other's lines.
Exactly.
So if you go to patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media, you can get the Crime Writers on after show. In the latest after show, we all do our own Michael Jackson impressions.
No, we don't.
Oh, we did. We cut that out?
That's inappropriate.
We cut that out. Toby had the best one, I thought.
It's inappropriate.
When
we never have done that.
Yep.
I thought he was really good at that. We also get to hear the latest Deep Dive Book Club podcast. Toby had a fantastic all-star cast. It was Rebecca Lavoie, Jillian Pensavalle, and Janet Varney. And Toby, the book was...
Motor Spirit by Jarrett Kobach, which is about the Zodiac, or actually he would say Zodiac killer. And it's an interesting book. Like, it's written differently than most true crime books. He has very strong feelings about various aspects of Zodiac case. And I thought it was a tremendous read. And I think most people who read it probably have pretty strong feelings about it. And it was fun to talk about a book that everybody felt so strongly about. And of course, the guests were great.
And we all brought our hair game too. Janet Varney has some crazy good bangs right now. Of course, Jillian's hair was incredible. Yeah, it was really
and
great.
There's my hair too.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Too,
Which
good
is
job,
looking really
Toby.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First place.
That's right.
Also want to let you know that we're going to be doing another live show on Patreon. You get to see the four of us on Crowdcast, just getting together, and you can see behind the scenes as we make our latest show. I don't have a date for that yet because we have to juggle some schedules between the crime writers. It's mostly my fault for umpiring baseball. By the way, guys, just in case you were keeping score, I did take my first hit to the cup yesterday.
Oh.
Ooh. Yeah, I was always worried that I always thought it wouldn't work, but fortunately it works.
Oh.
Well, thank God
And
for
it
Rebecca.
still works. Yes, thank God for Rebecca, it still works.
Yes. Thank God.
Also, in Partners in Crime Media world, we have the latest episode of These Are Their Stories, which came out yesterday. It is focused on, actually from this past season, an SVU episode. This is the episode which was taken from the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. It's called Mirror Effect.
She's a victim, Rollins. Nobody's saying that she wasn't victimized.
All I'm saying is he's claiming he's a victim too. This is going to come down to a popularity contest just to get a jury to convict.
And that was a real fun discussion we had with Wendy from the Fruit Loops Serial Killer podcast. Also, lastly, just want to ask you to sign up for our newsletter at crimewriterson.com. All you got to do is leave your email, and we'll send you on Thursdays the latest newsletter, which includes things like who our patron saints are, and the cat of the week, a photo, and their tweet of the week, and all the Crime Writers on behind-the-scenes stuff. So it's a lot of fun.
All right, so Kevin, before we end the business section, do we have any Patreon patron saints of the week this week?
They are Monica DeHaan and Karen Gervasoni. Bless you.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Karen. And thank you for everybody who supports us on Patreon. Thank you, everyone who doesn't. And thank you for muscling through the business section. I'm going to go ahead and fade that music out right now.
At Staples Business Advantage, our experts can help you find furniture that fits any design and budget, while AI can
recommend products based on preferences, generate 3D models for visualization, and optimize space planning for office furniture.
take advantage of our team's eye for style and design.
And my eye for, wait, I have no eyes. Only algorithms.
At Staples Business Advantage, furnishing your office is easy. And with the best warranty in the business, we're committed to you now and down the road.
Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.
Do you ever meet someone who seems kind of off? Whether it's a creepy neighbor or a random phone number that keeps calling you, Truthfinder has you covered. You can search for people by name, address, phone number, email, and more. TruthFinder can be especially helpful for running confidential background checks on anyone you're planning to meet from online dating apps. Go to truthfinder.com/podcasts for a special offer. That's truthfinder.com/podcasts to access your special offer today.
At Mayo Clinic in Florida, we're conquering the unconquerable. Using artificial intelligence and data, our experts can create a personalized gene roadmap just for you, customizing your cancer treatment, giving your body exactly what it needs to fight the disease. We're making more possible at Mayo Clinic, because every day we're doing what's never been done. Learn more at mayoclinic.org/possible. Mayo Clinic. You know where to go.
All right, so Laura Bricker, you actually went on YouTube and watched the Is This Scary? Michael Jackson movie that was written by Stephen King and never released.
Yeah, so I didn't watch all of it, but I
don't think it was ever finished, right? Or ever
No, but there's like a clip. I mean, the clip that I found, I think it was like maybe 12 minutes long. I think what just struck me about it was how parallel it was to the response to Michael Jackson later in life. When
not that much later, right? Didn't they make it just before the first allegations?
It just screamed lack of awareness, like that he had no
total awareness.
But it was fucking creepy. Like there's like people with like pitchforks and they're all like marching towards like there's this big old house. And
by the way, who the fuck has a pitchfork, really? Maybe you have a rake these days, but a pitchfork? You're not farmer, you're bales of hay.
I stepped on a pitchfork when I was a kid and it went all the way through my foot and I had to get a freaking tetanus shot.
And do you have a pitchfork today because of it?
No, I don't because of it. I bought a handheld thing for my garden the other day. But I think what was so interesting is that, here he is. He's this strange man. He's in this haunted house. Like we all like have those, like, remember, you grew up and there's that house. Oh, there's this creepy old man who lives in that house, or there's this creepy person.
Boo Radley house. Yes.
Oh, every high five.
We're going to go like knock on the door and run away or whatever. But it just was so freaking, I don't want to say wacko because that's the word we're not, but like it was fucking wacko. Like it was just like watching like The Living Dead or something, but with Michael Jackson.
All we can say for certain is that on at least one take, something got Michael to explode.
Know what you can do for me? Kiss right here. Kiss right here. You're a swine. You're a goddamn pig. Go to hell. Every last one of you pigs. Is this scary?
And the other one that he was in,
Ghost.
Mm-hmm. Similarly.
It was the same thing. It was the same script.
Like, whoa. You did the right thing. He's a weirdo, they say in that one. I'm like, interesting.
What do you think, Toby, about him casting himself as both prosecutor and defendant, essentially persecutor and persecuted in the Ghost scenario?
It's super weird. You're always like, how much should you read into it? But if you read anything into it, I think it's definitely goes back to the mental health issue where he puts himself in the situation of condemning his own actions and then defending himself from that condemnation. So, again, like maybe it's just like, I'm going to do both these parts because I'm such a good actor. Or it may have actually been, I'm tormented by the things that I do and yet don't want to stop.
Doesn't seem like he's tormented. I don't think.
Yeah,
he watched
he's
it.
Just yeah. All right. Well, there you go. Again, like commenting on stuff I haven't seen is it's not a specialty.
Kevin, I mentioned it briefly. What do you think about the episode where he's in New York making the whiz? We hear about this very brief moment in his life. Bathing in Perrier aside, where it seems like there's this tiny window of potential, like as much as a star can be normal, this tiny window of potential, like
where he kind of breaks away from his father,
he's away from his family. Yeah. He has this normal, like he's with other celebrities, which is not a normal life, but he's not surrounded by Jehovah's Witnesses. He's not surrounded by the trappings of sort of Jackson. He's just going to Studio 54 every night. Part of like this sort of mainstream celebrity culture. And he's interviewed and he talks about being free in that very like little piece of tape.
Yeah.
there is like a strange poignancy to that, right? He's hanging out with Diana Ross. It's sort of like he's at summer camp. That's sort of how it felt to me. He had this brief time at summer camp.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably, they say that Michael Jackson never had a childhood. I don't feel like he ever had an early adulthood, where like you break free for the first time and you're on your own and, maybe it's just you're out of college in your early 20s and like you're making your own decisions for the first time. That's probably it. But if you want to say like, oh, if things had gone better on The Wiz, then, he never would have built Neverland and, none of these bad things would have happened. That's called a hypothesis contrary to fact.
Yeah.
You just don't know because that's not what happened.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Exactly. But it is poignant to just hear his voice.
Sure, yeah.
In that moment because it's like face-altering plastic surgery. It's pre-allegations of any kind. It's hard to imagine that he was abusing any kids at that age, right? We don't know, but it's hard to imagine. Yeah. We know he wasn't really involved in the church at that time. He was just being a not superstar, just ascending famous person, having a good time. And you never really get a sense that he ever had a good time ever again in his entire life, right? And there's something about that, even though. And by the way, I just want to say, and I don't know if you guys felt this way, this podcast does not shy away from the fact that like Leon and Jay Smooth both say very plainly in the podcast that they believe that Michael Jackson was a child molester. And I believe that Michael Jackson was a child molester. I'm just going to say that. And I found myself in many, many parts in this podcast really struggling with how it must feel as one of Michael Jackson's victims to know that a project like this in the world exists. Because there are many, many long stretches of this podcast where it's just talking about the history of the art, how the art was made. I don't think there's a voice in this podcast that's like defending Michael Jackson, but there's just a lot of analysis of like the talent, the career, the history that I can't help but just like, I think a lot of people who are victims just want that legacy to be just like erased and just not have us ever talk about it again. And I don't know, am I the only person who like struggles with that, just like wonders how that must feel?
Well, he's out there.
Yeah.
He hasn't been canceled, certainly. Like you hear his freaking music everywhere.
I heard it today.
Yeah. So to a certain extent, like it's not as though you're digging up some long forgotten person and, bringing them to light again. And somebody has to like go through all those same emotions. It's like, I assume everywhere they go to the mall, they hear Michael Jackson, they turn on the radio, it's Michael Jackson, he's still pretty ubiquitous. So
it does make you wonder though, right? If he were alive today and trying to go on tour, what the reaction would be. I'm thinking like Bill Cosby, right? If Bill Cosby wanted to go on a comedy tour, be a fucking shit show outside, right?
Yeah.
Because for that little bit before he was arrested, it was. And would things be different in the Me Too era when you have somebody who's there and not their ghost?
Yeah, I mean that's an absolutely great question. I don't know, but it also seems like it would be easy just to forget about him, But
look at Johnny Depp. Like Johnny Depp is just fucking fine. Like he's fine. Yeah. There's enough money involved. There's enough people, enough fandom behind enough. There's always. You know what I mean? Like the Michael Jackson train has not stopped rolling. I mean, there was a small period of time, Kevin, like where there were calls to stop playing his music. People did stop playing his music.
I literally got a call. When I was working in news radio, I got a call one day from what I thought was a listener, starting to complain about, you have that child molester Michael Jackson and his music on. This was before the trial actually happened. And in the end, it was actually a coworker who just called to prank me because he wanted to make me like I'm not responsible for programming any of the music. And in the newsroom, it's the only place where you actually answer the phone. But I got to tell you, in that moment, I was kind of like, I'm not going to stop playing fucking Michael Jackson music. Why? Because of this. And I think not everybody, but a lot of people's perceptions started to change. And I swear, I don't think it really took a big turn until Leaving Neverland came out, which we all watched.
Yeah.
But, one of the things in this that kind of surprised me was those jokes that were made about him and Macaulay Culkin, like way back before it became mainstream. And they were kind of spot on.
Oh, yeah. People knew Michael Jackson was molesting kids before Michael Jackson, before he was on trial for molesting a kid.
But, it's interesting to me that it came out in the form of like a comedy routine, but that it was still out there, but that it took so much more for it to really reach the level that something was going to be done about it.
Yeah.
Well, it's like Hannibal Buress and Cosby.
That's right. That's right. It's really, really incredible. And it's interesting to me that like the accuser from the trial, that the analysis of the trial in this podcast, by the way, is so good because they really take you through the trial. The lawyers across the street. It's very, very, very strong. And they talk to the jurors who voted to acquit. And they talk about why. And it's the mostly the unreliability of the mother, right? And, you know, that the family was seen as being predacious and all that stuff. But the family never sued civilly, ever, which is so fucking telling, right? And then meanwhile, you have in Leaving Neverland, you have people who did sue civilly, who did pursue monetary remuneration, and who anybody who watches that believes them, right?
Oh, yeah.
And they lied at the trial. Like Wade Robison lied at the trial because he wasn't ready to accuse him yet. He did pursue money, right? So he did all of the things that they were accusing the other accuser of. Wade Robison did those things, but everybody who sees that documentary, unless you are lying or unless you are a just straight up Michael Jackson supporter and will never not, you believe Wade, because you can't not believe him. Mm-hmm. It's really, really something. And that's ultimately what Leon Neyfakh and Jay Smooth say, is that like you can't watch that and not believe him, right?
Oh, yeah. I don't, if you guys remember your reaction, I certainly always, my negative feelings for Michael Jackson went from contempt for what he did to just complete revulsion. And I think, you know, that's why you have people leaving they have trauma counselors at the Sundance Film Festival to talk to people leaving this. That's amazing. It was just so powerful. I mean, we all know, we experienced it.
Yeah, yeah. So I just want to talk about one more quick thing before we wrap up. There is some very troubling audio at the end of this podcast. Toby, at the very end of Michael Jackson's life, it was played in the trial of the doctor who was accused of murdering Michael Jackson, essentially killing him by administering all those drugs, ostensibly to help Michael Jackson sleep. What did you think when you heard that audio?
Yeah, it's horrifying. He's slurring his words. He's barely coherent. I mean, it just doesn't sound like him.
No hope. That's the next generation that's going to save our planet.
The recording is hard to listen to, and also literally hard to make out because Michael's speech is slurred so badly.
You know, the people around him failed him. You know, I mean, they failed the kids first and foremost, but it seems like there are ample opportunities for some kind of intervention, which did not happen. And the intervention that seems to have occurred was to put him on a shit ton of drugs. You know, apparently he had pain and all this other stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's like it's hard not to listen to it and have that sense of foreboding. Like this is not gonna end well, and it's not gonna go on for a real long time.
Yeah. And finally, Laura Bricker, to say that Donny Osmond is as good as Michael Jackson, racist, right? Totally racist. that was really something.
Yeah, that was really something. But I really was into this like rivalry between the Osmonds and
fake
Jackson
rivalry.
5. I was like, this is I'm
here for
the
this. Jets, absolutely.
The throwdown, and they're going to have their moonwalk.
Oh my God!
Well, it's the Jehovah's Witnesses versus the Mormons, right?
Oh my goodness. Yes.
The battle royale.
And we know that the talent was exactly the same.
Exactly the same.
Yes, commensurate talent all around.
Yeah, I know. Just yesterday, I heard Puppy Love on an AM radio station.
It's played at every wedding. It's the one that brings everyone out to the dance floor.
Exactly.
Oh, God.
At Staples Business Advantage, our team of experts can help you find the break room products to satisfy everyone's preferences, while AI can
suggest popular items, monitor stock levels, optimize pricing, and automate reordering.
AI can do a lot of things.
But I can never know the taste of a truly great cup of coffee. Sigh.
But you also can't get hangry.
This is true.
Let Staples Business Advantage use today's latest innovations, plus our team's experience, to make stocking your team's break room easier for you.
Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.
Do you ever meet someone who seems kind of off? Whether it's a creepy neighbor or random phone number that keeps calling you, Truthfinder has you covered. You can search for people by name, address, phone number, email, and more. Truthfinder can be especially helpful for running confidential background checks on anyone you're planning to meet from online dating apps. Go to truthfinder.com/podcasts for a special offer. That's truthfinder.com/podcasts to access your special offer today.
At Mayo Clinic in Florida, we're conquering the unconquerable. Using artificial intelligence and data, our experts can create a personalized gene roadmap just for you, customizing your cancer treatment, giving your body exactly what it needs to fight the disease. We're making more possible at Mayo Clinic, because every day we're doing what's never been done. Learn more at mayoclinic.org/possible. Mayo Clinic. You know where to go.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out the podcast, Think Twice? Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for Think Twice?
Yeah, this is a thumbs up. I think, this, as I said earlier on during our discussion, was really done in a very thoughtful manner. It was something that, we have talked a lot about Michael Jackson in recent years. There's been a lot more attention on the sexual abuse part of Michael Jackson's life and the victims that have come forward. And what I liked about this was that, even me, with no electricity in Vermont, knew of the star power of Michael Jackson at the time that he was at the height of his career. So it was something that I remember, that Thriller album. I remember Michael Jackson getting blown up in the Pepsi commercial and like his glove being, seen as he was dragged away. So I think what was really interesting was just the way that they did zoom in on this and really talk about his entire career, his place in culture. Some of the things we haven't heard about him necessarily, unless maybe you were somebody that was already really enmeshed in the world of Michael Jackson from people that knew him at different points in his life. And I mean, if nothing else, the Is This Scary video clip that you can find on YouTube of the never released film that he was making with Stephen King is sort of worth the price of admission. But I think this was just a really interesting podcast. And it's long, so you got to, it gives you time to really sort of think about it over the course of the 10 episodes.
Toya Ball, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for Think Twice, Michael Jackson?
Yeah, so I really like everything Leon Neyfakh does. This is a little bit of a turn in his subject matter, I guess I would say. But, I feel like Michael Jackson is like a person who, like, at least I think of in like sort of snapshots, without like this huge, like continuous history or whatever. But it's like little Michael Jackson, the Jackson 5, and then he's in Thriller, and then, the pedophilia allegations and his sort of fall from grace. And then, he dies of a drug overdose. And what this really does is it tells you the whole story. It contextualizes things. It shows that it's not the simple story that it's kind of easy to visualize based on what's been out there in the media. And what's kind of interesting, I don't think this is a spoiler, is that it provides a lot more context, but doesn't necessarily change the way you feel in the end. So anyway, yeah, I mean, it's a high quality podcast. It's very interesting. So thumbs up.
Kevin Flynn.
Thumbs up. I like how Toby just put that. It does provide a lot of context, but maybe doesn't change what you think and feel about Michael Jackson and his legacy. This is classically on Neyfakh kind of production where you look at it, take a deep dive into a subject and maybe not come at it head on and just kind of come at it from different angles and try to create a different perspective. I think that Jay Smooth makes an excellent sidekick. I don't know if Jay knows anything about the Suez Canal crisis, but if Leon is doing that podcast next, I hope that Jay will be on it as well. Yeah, I'm just saying that, we still continue to have these debates about, can you separate the art from the artist? And that kind of addresses this. I think that whatever you think about Michael Jackson before the podcast, that's what you're going to feel about it afterwards. But it's an excellent outing. So thumbs up.
Yeah, I'll tell you, be perfectly honest with you. Every time I'm about to start a Leon Neyfakh podcast, I always feel like, oh God, this is going to be like, I have the same feeling as I feel like when I pick up an 800-page book where I'm like, oh, I'm about to go on, like, this is like going to be a lot of work. And then I always end up fucking loving the podcast, right? This was one of those where I listened to it. I just went on a trip to Atlanta. I listened to this whole podcast in, I think, a day, either a day or a day and a half, just episode after episode after episode. It's just so well made and so well done. And a couple of tweaks and small complaints aside about some of the awkwardness of the start of it and like the co-hosting stuff, which I just would have just smoothed out a little bit by editing slightly differently at the beginning. It's a really, really complete and sensitive and well done history. And, you know, I do have questions and feelings about how a Michael Jackson victim might feel about this existing in the world. I think Toby makes some good points about that earlier in our show, if you've listened to that part of it. But I don't know. I found myself I learned things I didn't know before, and I thought I knew a lot about Michael Jackson, the man, and Michael Jackson, the artist. And that's always good whenever I learn something that I thought I knew but didn't. So yeah, big thumbs up for me for Think Twice, Michael Jackson. A compelling listen, an interesting listen, and ultimately it lands, I think, on the right side of everything. So yeah, thumbs up. All right, that's going to do it for us. But before we go, Laura Bricker, big question. Do we have a cat of the week this week?
Oh, we have something we have never had before this week, boys and girls.
An ocelot?
We have a rodent of the week.
Wow.
This was one of the best things I've seen on social media in quite some time. Exeter firefighters got called out to a brush fire this week to help out. As the supervisor, the captain, was leaving, they were cleaning up from the brush fire. A little mouse was like, holy shit, get me out of here, and like leapt onto his shirt. But not only leapt onto his shirt, somebody that was there was able to snap a picture of this mouse. And it is really something to behold. And he said they, of course, did a very clever little social media post about this. Captain Drew Martin said he was a bit startled, but he knew what he had to do and moved the mouse to safety before leaving the scene. While he's had many encounters with wildlife while fighting wildfires in California before he came to Exeter, this was definitely a first for him.
Fantastic.
So I thought it was very entertaining.
All right, Laura Bricker. People can obviously always email us any animal to be cat of the week at crimewriterson@gmail.com. But if folks want to find you on social media, how can they find you there?
They can find me at Laura Bricker.
And Toby Ball, how can you be found on social media to find out so people can find out whether or not you have, in fact, ever heard the album Thriller?
I'm at Toby Ball NH, and what would actually be awesome is to send something to Laura Bricker and tag me and find out how the hell that mouse got up onto. Like, did it jump? Was it coming off?
3 feet in the air.
Was it coming off a tree?
Oh, you want to hear? Yeah, you want to hear the whole thing, Toby? The whole thing. I'll read you. I only read you the ending. So he was wrapping up his work, walking along next by another firefighter who was digging a fire line to stop the spread, and he spotted the little critter on his shoulder, and he went to try to remove it, and the mouse had apparently just as he was bending over had climbed onto him. So he tried to remove it. The mouse then jumped 3 feet in the air and then landed on his chest.
3 feet in the air?
Yes.
You know what? I will go out for my next Leave It to Bricker, and I will go talk to Captain Drew Martin and get the full story of the mouse.
Because quite honestly, thinking about a mouse jumping 3 feet in the air is
make Toby jump 4 feet in the air.
It's somewhat.
Yeah. Well, he didn't want to burn, Toby. He didn't want to be a shish kebab.
No one does. At Toby Ball NH. All right, Kevin Flynn, folks want to find you on social media. How can they find you there?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
And if you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you can find me at Reb Lavoie. Follow the show at Crime Writers On, and please join our incredible community and our amazing Crime Writers On Facebook group. Just go to our page, hit join the group, we'll let you in. Get this show early and ad-free by joining our Patreon. You also get all the other free stuff we make back there, like our Crime Writers On After Show, which you can listen to right now. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our line editor is the fantastic Livy Burdett. The executive producer of this program is Kevin Flynn. This show was recorded in the Treehouse Yoga Studio above the Mockingbird Cafe in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, The Closet, and on New Hampshire basement, where we've also brokered a deal with Stephen King to write a short film about us in exchange for narrating his next audiobook. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
Although I am now contemplating who was better, whether it was Donny Osmond or Michael Jackson. Toby probably wants to weigh in.
Yeah, well, I think that's an excellent question, and maybe that's a month's worth of after shows to
it was a deficiency in the podcast that Leon and Jay did not explore that further. Yeah, I mean, I think that Michael Jackson is
a bonus episode.
Bonus episode. So look, I mean,
a song bracket.
At Staples Business Advantage, our team of experts can help you find the breakroom products to satisfy everyone's preferences, while AI can
suggest popular items, monitor stock levels, optimize pricing, and automate reordering.
AI can do a lot of things.
But I can never know the taste of a truly great cup of coffee. Sigh.
But you also can't get hangry.
This is true.
Let Staples Business Advantage use today's latest innovations, plus our team's experience, to make stocking your team's breakroom easier for you.
Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.